Hi class, welcome to Module 1 as we start looking at social problems for summer of 17. You're going to find short lectures or talks at the beginning of every module. I will try to keep these under 20 minutes, and basically they're going to review what you're going to do for this particular module. So you can think about it as much shorter than listening to me in class. But hopefully informative and to give you some guidelines as you move forward. The learning objectives are here for this particular module, which incorporates Chapter 1. And we're looking at what defines a social problem. We're looking at theory. And so we're looking at sociology theory, and the primary theories are conflict, functional, and social interaction. We're looking at the social condition and behavior, and we're thinking about the issues that people face as they face these social problems and how we research them. So the goal is to develop some critical thinking and some understanding of what a social problem is in our society today. Now, social problems change over time. What may have been a social problem 100 years ago is not a social problem today because it's governed by the society's determination of what a social problem is. But it's truly something that looks at society and not necessarily the individual. Now, we'll talk about where we look at the individual, and we do that related to theory. But it's important to have a clear understanding of what a social problem is. So think about that as we move forward. So here's your video. It will be in this spot right here, and you'll be able to click on it, which you've already done if you're watching this. And I've asked you before you start to please complete the pre-questions and drop those in the drop box. The drop box is located under assessments. You can see Dropbox, and you're going to see where to drop that in. You've already looked at your syllabus online and the online information. So let's look at a few things, and this text will probably have more than the words that I use, but we're welcoming you to the first module, and we address these issues of social problems. This is one of the most important pieces you need to know as you begin the course, how to clearly define a social problem. You'll find that tied to every single assignment you do to this course, that you need to clearly understand what a social problem is. I often have people talk about, okay, there are issues out there like dog and cats needing neutered so that we don't overpopulate the area with strays, and they consider this a social problem. Well, for this course, we're focusing on humans, not animals. I often have students also say that suicide is a social problem, and we can see that in a way. You can see that you can see easily that suicide has a strong effect on society. But what caused the suicide? What's the issue? Suicide is actually a mental health problem. It's an individual problem, even though we see the actions of one suicide in a high school and multiple people follow through, or a suicide pact. But what we have to look at is the social problems that caused it. Was it the bullying that occurred? Was it the school that existed? So we want to look at the bigger problem. Now, bullying is on that cusp of whether it's a social problem or not. And so at this point, we still say that bullying is related to some other problem. Why do people get bullied? because they're poor, because gender issues, because of gender ideology of what a person should look like and how they should be. And so those are important pieces as we look at the definition. A social problem is something that affects the whole society and is deemed a social problem by the society itself. So there's this double whammy. To look at this, we begin with the sociological imagination. Now, that term was coined by C. Wright Mills, and he writes about the sociological imagination very clearly. And sometimes I think we overuse that, but it's important to remember that the sociological imagination understands social outcomes are shaped in the social context, actors, and social actions. And what we're looking at here is the actors um, need to explore the definition, and we look at the norms and the motives that occur and how they are shaped by the situation. The sociological imagination can be considered as a capacity to see how things socially and how they interact and influence each other. It takes us stepping outside of our own background. Each of our backgrounds is different, though a lot of similarities there depending on our race and our gender and our age, all of those things in place. But we need to step outside and explore things at a deeper level. As you start going through this, and you've read this, you're going to see in your modules each week, you'll have assignments to do. Though this misnumbered by the way that the uh, process works. If you notice coming down, it tells you that you're going to look at the PowerPoints and you're reading the module information, and then you're going to hop into viewing a TED Talk here. This will help you look at the issues of research and understanding what's going on. I'm also asking you to make sense of sociology theory. There's a quick little video here, well, not real quick, but you can skim through it to understand what makes sense in the videos. So you have these 8 steps that move forward, and then you're going to contribute to your discussion board after you've followed all the other pieces of looking on. I'm hoping that the library has reintegrated their site and we can get to the videos as quickly as we did in the past. So there'll be some changes in this from where I'm recording it because this is the week they're changing the library website. With that said, let me pop over to the PowerPoint for the week. And I'll not spend a whole lot of time reviewing these, but hit on the parts that are very important for you to understand. So, sociology, why bother to take sociology? For many of you, you're required to take sociology in criminal justice and social work and nursing and in the medical fields. Why take a course in sociology? Because sociology looks at society. It's different than psychology that looks at the individual, but we look at the formation of society and we look at the objective and systematic approach to understanding the causes in this course of social problems. We analyze the relationship between individuals and society and their role and structure in solving the problem. Now, social problems are global, and this course in previous Gen Eds was considered a global course because we look at the issues across multiple countries. For many of you, as you look at your assignments, you can only look locally, but it's important to extrapolate what you're learning here and see it as a society as a whole, that we affect one another. The waste from our country affects another. You know, I lived in Ohio for years, grew up in Ohio, and one of the big issues was the factory waste that came out. And we created such pollution that as it moved east, Pennsylvania, New York, and Canada face things called acid rain that would destroy the finishes on cars built out of the factories that were from Ohio that were spewing. Now, things like the EPA have stepped into place to make a difference, but we can see the global effects even more today as we understand we live in a very global society. I've asked you to use your sociological imagination here. Remember, as I talked about C. Wright Mills stating this, that there is the understanding of the link between our personal experiences and our social world. Using the sociological imagination allows us to distinguish between our personal problems and the public issue. So let's go back to suicide as we look at that. Personal troubles that exist in that process. But the public issue is why. Is it the lack of mental health services? Was it the lack of support for that person that they were bullied? What was going on? Was it family problems at home? You see, we start looking at the public issues. So personal troubles occur within the character of the individual, their immediate relation with each other, and they can be resolved by the individual. And then we have the public issues. The values held to be previously by the public is felt to be threatened in the process. What's going on? Where's the public debate? So, what's the problem? What is a social problem? A social problem is a social condition that has a negative consequence for the individual or our social world. Problems can threaten social institutions, the family when we look at spousal abuse, education with the rising cost of tuition, or the declining support of educational institutions by states, or we can look at the changing role of the student-teacher relationship. Economy, unemployment, underemployment, big issues that we face, or the fact that more people working at lower wage jobs and the effects. We can already see as we start talking about these particular social problems that one affects another. And you're going to see the lap that crosses across each one. By the end of the course, I'm going to be asking you to solve social problems. Throughout the course, you're going to be asked to solve a social problem. But in the first, as you start to look at this, I want you to see that ripple effect, that if the family's not supported, then we have more crime. If we have more crime, then we have less safety in urban areas, and we'll see the interplay of that. Problems can threaten our physical world. We look at those. Global warming, oil spills, toxic waste, urbanization, roadways, deterioration of our infrastructure. All of those things come under play. We look at the objective realities coming from the knowledge of a particular social condition exists, and the subjective, how those affect our society. So the subjective addresses how the problem is defined as a problem, and it's based on the concept of social construct of reality. And you're going to hear that term over and over. You know, the social construct. Gender is a social construct. Race is a social construct. That it's made up by society, the definition that comes into place. All right. We're going to look at histories of social problems and how they come into place. The identifying a social problem means that it's gone through a number of processes. That transforming process where it's transformed from a private trouble to a public issue. A legitimization process, which is the formalization manner. It's generated that the problems are being addressed, they're being brought up in the media, they're being shown to be important, goes through a conflict stage where we negotiate back and forth, and groups believe that they can no longer work with the system, then they will start radical movements. Think about the movements that exist out there. And so even things politically like the Tea Party movement that felt that things had become too liberal in the process are part of attacking and saying that our political system was a social problem, or the way that we were dealing with things. The legitimization of the problem is really important, but this conflict and then this beginning that the group believes that they're out there, and so we see radical environmental movements out there trying to protect the society we're in. So, understanding the sociological perspective, we do it through theory. For those of you who have taken theory classes before, you often talk about the micro and the macro, and you talk about mesotheories. For this course, we're a freshman level. We're looking at micro and macro theories. In other words, macro theories focus on the societal level, and micro theories focus on the individual level of analysis. And as we explore it, you're going to see that theories that we work with in class are clearly divided into those. We have the functional theory, which looks at the consequences that are intended and recognize what goes on. Functionalists have say that the society, I'm sorry, I should be on this slide. Functionalist theories say that we focus on how society creates, maintains orders. It sets those social norms. It says what's bad and what's good. And we have this control that comes into place. Now, there's oftentimes uh, functions of societies that come into place. And let's look at education. Why do we have public education? We're going to talk about that in the education chapter, but it comes into place when the work environment changed, when we could no longer have 7 and 8-year-olds working because there were labor laws. What were we going to do with those? We set up a public education system to help them become stronger and know more so that they can work at better jobs. So they get the skills and the credentials to do what they need to do so they can better serve society. But there's a secondary function, this latent function. It becomes the babysitter to take care of the children, to cover those needs. So you remember, they were educated at home before, and so we have this changing environment, and we need to take care of them. And so we have hidden consequences. Think about some of the rules related to or laws that go into place. Oftentimes, their function is has those latent functions that are hidden to control what's going on. If I legalize alcohol, then I've supported, right, that powerful base out there that are the brewers that come into place. Let's think about it more as we think about the legalization of marijuana, which is coming around the country, the latent function that comes into place. We also look at the changes that affect the law system and the decrease of the number of people in the jail system, as well as the increase of profit for people. Conflict theory considers how society is held together by power and coercion for the benefit of those in power. Now, Karl Marx is considered the father of conflict theory, and he saw that conflict emerged from the economical substructures of capitalism. He talks about the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, and that conflict between, and that the fact that the bourgeoisie is a smaller group, but they are the power, and that they take away that ability for the masses oftentimes to have that you end up in that class conscious situation. Now, if we look at functionalist theory, and I'm jumping backwards, and we look at what Durkheim says, he talks about anomie, that without structure, we feel separated from society. What Marx says is with conflict theory, that we alienate humans from their species or their true potential. We take it away by dropping them in these categories. Now, the feminist perspective can be either macro or micro because it falls under other theories as we start to look at it. There are a few chapters we look at feminist theories. It is not one of the three primaries, and you can see that from our SLOs. But it's important to understand that this theory defines gender as the source of inequality, and the fact that society has constantly looked at the male perspective. And with that, we also think about it in our society as well as European society, that they've looked at white male as the main source. And so we have to evaluate that. The interactionist, we also call it symbolic interaction, perspective focuses on how we are created and how we maintain our social reality through language and words and symbols. And we look at that effect on the individual. George Herbert Mead is one of those early theorists that come into place that we talk about, and he is an American theorist where we look at Marx and we look at Durkheim being French and Marx being German and Weber being German, and we'll talk about Zimmel down the road, German. But Mead actually is a graduate of Oberlin College and is the basis of the beginning of the Chicago School, which rises a great deal in the 1950s. But Mead is well before that, and he talks about the self is a mental and social process and reflects the ability to see others in relationship to ourselves and vice versa. Following Mead, there are people who talk in symbolic interactions, such as Cooley, who looks at the looking glass self, as well as Herbert Blumer, who coined the term symbolic interaction, which emphasizes how the existence of the mind and the self emerges from interactions and how we see these symbols being used. So, how do social problems emerge from interaction? Problem behavior is learned from one another. So we look at crime and how do you learn to be a criminal? We send someone to juvenile hall and they come back even a stronger criminal as we learn that, or they learn from their parents as we look at parenting skills. Social problems emerge from the definition themselves as we define them, and the solutions to the problems also emerge from those definitions. So as you're going through this course, for each chapter, you're going to see this breakdown: functionalist, conflict, interaction, the micro and the macro, looking at what we determine the problem is and how we address the problem. Now, I've given you a video to watch on some of the science of sociology as well as the theory, but sociology is based in research. I've often had students say, oh, sociology is just, we all know this because we live it. But oftentimes, what we live is not what the rest of society lives. Think how differently things here are in Mansfield, Pennsylvania versus those of you in the course sitting in Philadelphia. I leave my house unlocked. I don't worry about those things. My dog's protected, right? I'm very comfortable with that situation. It depends on where we live and what our perceptions are. And so it's important that we look at the research and we look at basic research that expands our understanding and we look at applied research. We do not do research for the sake of doing research. We do it to solve a problem. And so the focus of this course will always be on solving a problem. So I leave you with you thinking about the discussions that come into place. And as you move forward with the course and view these videos, you'll be able then to move on to your module discussion. And as you come to your first module discussion, you're going to see that it is posted here and what makes a social problem. You're going to comment. I popped into the class that previously took this, and you can see how they've entered their response. You've got a rubric to follow and some directions on what to do with your discussion board. I look forward to your discussions, and I apologize for the length of this. I hope you have a great day as you get started on summer social problems.